You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Welcome back, everybody, to Reclaim Catholic. This is Jacob Nelson. Firstly, I wanted to give an update on a few things. Thank you to WCAT Radio. I used to do some work with them a few years ago with John Studi. I think we had something like 56 episodes of The Lost Voice, which you can still find on WCAT Radio's website. We talked a lot about philosophy and cultural things, not completely dissimilar from what I'm doing now, but some other things too, and John is a great guy to work with. So if you like this content, go check that out too. But WCAT Radio has decided to pick up Reclaim Catholic, which now puts this on iHeartRadio, Spotify, as well as the Apple Podcast and Patreon channels that I've had already. So a great thank you to them, and check out WCAT Radio and all of the other great offerings that they have. They have a lot of different shows on there, and so I'm sure you'll find some other things too that will pique your interest, whet your appetite. But a note too that Patreon is still the only place to support this effort directly. If you want to support the effort to produce excellent Catholic content to combat the crazy communists, check out patreon.com/reclaimcatholic. And I put some other things on there that you don't get on the other things like iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. Some text things, blogs. There's an opportunity to chat on there with other patrons and things of that sort. So in the long run, that's going to be a great avenue as well for more material. But that also leads me to another item. I'm aware that the last couple episodes had some technical issues, some stereo issues where the sound is only coming out of one side, as well as some other things. And so I apologize for that. It underscores the point, though, that I'm working with pretty basic equipment. And anything that comes to me through Patreon is going to go directly to buying better equipment. My hope is to elevate the show's production value. I have some equipment in mind already that will certainly do that. So just know that while it would be lovely to take all of that money that might ever come in through Patreon and go buy a 30-acre tract of woods and create a Catholic compound to do the Benedict option, which would be my dream. But it will firstly go to increasing the production value of this podcast, because I want this to be truly an enjoyable experience, as well as something that is going to help you learn and grow in your faith and be greater disciples of the Lord in this crazy upside-down clown world we live in. But on to stuff that matters, because nobody wants to start an episode of anything with hearing an advertisement to pay me stuff so I can go buy stuff. So anyway, check those things out. iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Patreon, as well as all that WCAT Radio has to offer. Do you guys remember last week on a couple of the shows that I had offered how the communist hates history? Every single communist wants to destroy history because history is like the rope that ties a boat to the dock. Once that rope is gone, the communist can direct the boat wherever they want to go, and they can crash it and destroy it and shipwreck it on whatever shore they want. Well, news article: communists demolish and disappear Tiananmen Square statue in attempt to erase history. Go figure. The greatest bastion of communism on the face of this planet right now, the People's Republic of China, wants to destroy a monument, a statue, which commemorated their atrocious attack and slaughter of college students in the 1980s. Who were fighting for freedom. The statue, though, it's important to note, was not in mainland China. Of course, China's already gotten rid of all of those things in mainland China. No, it's in Hong Kong. It's in Hong Kong. The Chi-Coms, as the great Rush Limbaugh would call them, are seeking to demoralize the last bastion of freedom in China while also destroying history. The communists are efficient people sometimes, especially when it comes to destruction and killing. No, they're trying to teach those in Hong Kong who the last 2 years, there have been great protests for the sake of freedom, them flying proudly the American flag. No, they want to destroy the sense and desire of freedom in Hong Kong. But another really notable thing about this, the communists, even in their own nation, they don't want to work in the light. They don't want to work where everybody can see them. Because even the communist knows that if the majority of people saw what they were truly about, they would never achieve what they want to achieve. So, how did they destroy these statues? Well, they put up great big plastic opaque barriers all around, and in the dead of night, they went in, they chopped up the statue piece by piece, covered it up, and took it away. In the dead of night, when very few people would see it, and anybody who would try to get pictures or try to document what was going on at all, they were rushed out. There were security teams, and so there's very little documentation of this. They're trying to memory hole Tiananmen Square. This is atrocious, of course, but not surprising. This very thing, is why communism and communists hate the Catholic Church, at least on the natural level. Communists hate the church supernaturally because they love Satan, whether they know it or not. They are part of Satan's religion. But naturally, because the church is the common thread throughout all of Western history. Now, a little bit of a history lesson, because history is important for other reasons than just combating commies, but history tells us so much of where we came from, who we are, what we're about, and so forth. Do you know who started the various churches and when? I'm not going to go through all of them because that would be ridiculous, but Pentecostalism, Charles Parham, 1900 in California. So the communist doesn't have much motivation to go destroy Pentecostalism because it only can recount history from when it was founded, 1900. It can only recount 122 years of history. So if they put all their effort in destroying the Pentecostal religion, they're only divorcing a small number of people, relatively speaking, from a small segment of history. Jehovah's Witnesses, Charles Russell, 1870, again, you're talking 150 years. Salvation Army by William Booth in 1865, Seventh-day Adventists, Ellen White, 1860, The Church of Latter-day Saints, which are not Christian, by Joseph Smith, 1830. So even one of the, as we go, we're getting more and more people in these various religions and more time, but you figure even here, we're still not even at 200 years of history. When Christianity is 2,000 years old, we're not even talking about 10% of the life of Christianity. So why would a communist want to destroy these religions? Maybe down the line they would, but they're going to go to where they can do the most damage. So as you keep going, Congregationalism, John and Charles Wesley, and that was in 1744 in England. The Quakers, George Fox, 1647, England. Methodism, John Wesley, 1739, England. We keep going. Calvinism, John Calvin, 1536 in Switzerland. The Anglican Communion, King Henry VIII, which he didn't create Anglicanism, he actually just corrupted the Anglican rite of the Catholic Church. And that was in 1534. And of course, Martin Luther in 1517 Germany. It's interesting, isn't it, that the communist doesn't really go after these that hard, or if they do, it's not real hard to direct them how they want. The Catholic Church, founded by Jesus himself, when he tells Peter that you are the rock I will build my church on. And he gives the apostles after the resurrection the power to forgive sins and to bind sins to people. We can maybe get into this and take a whole episode to get into the foundings of the church. I think it'd be wonderful. And I'll make note that maybe that's something we can do, because we don't want to just harp on the negative. We want to learn our faith well. But Jesus, through the apostles, starts the church in the midst of the Roman Empire 2,000 years ago. And the church has withstood the test of time. She has not changed in her teachings, her dogmas, her doctrines over 2,000 years. The communist has great incentive to destroy Catholicism, because Catholicism is the common thread throughout all of Western history. Even with Lutheranism, destroy the Lutheran Church, you're only destroying a segment of Christianity, one tentacle of it, if you will, that can only recount 500 years. You see, this isn't good enough for the communist. Just as Joe Biden's Build Back Better bill wasn't good enough because it only spent $5 trillion. That wasn't enough for the communists. And this is part of their downfall, is that more is never enough. And you'll see this in communist regimes, communist countries. They can never have enough communism, because the second anybody has any kind of personal property or personal thought, for that matter, it has to be stolen. It has to be destroyed. So more is never enough for the communist. And so even if they could destroy 500 years of Christianity through Lutheranism, they still have to account for the first 1,500 years of Christianity through Catholicism. And that's why the communist hates the church so much on the natural level, because it is such a mooring point, a point of strength for people who believe in it, that the church is greater than themselves. It's greater than any nation. It's greater than any political ideology, because it was founded by Christ himself. And so both on the natural level as well as the supernatural level, the church keeps people firmly rooted, not just in human history, but in all of salvation history. And as the great John Paul II wrote in his first encyclical, Redemptor Hominis, Christ fully reveals man to himself. And so if Christ is the one who reveals man to himself, and the Catholic Church is the church that Christ founded, who he instilled all grace into so the church might disseminate all graces to all of humanity, then the church also helps reveal man to himself. And that's something communism can't stand. The truth. Communism cannot stand the truth. It cannot stand the truth about people. It can't stand the truth about individuals. It can't stand the truth about history. It can't stand the truth about anything. Which leads me, sorry, I was just looking for a piece of paper. Leads me, I'm going to go on this very notion. Sonya Sotomayor, the Supreme Court Justice, in the hearing last week on federal vaccine mandates. She said those numbers show that Omicron is as deadly and causes as much serious disease in the unvaccinated as Delta did. We have over 100,000 children, which we've never had before, in serious condition and many on ventilators. That's just a lie. That's an out-and-out lie. No matter how you feel about coronavirus and COVID and everything else, this is just flat out wrong. In fact, Rochelle Walensky, the director of the CDC, last week after that was on news programs and said we have no more than 3,500 children in the hospital. And they can't even distinguish now, and they've admitted we don't know if people in the hospital are in the hospital with COVID or from COVID, because they never bothered to make that distinction. That's a pretty important distinction to make. This is anybody from Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, to CDC director. You can go down the list. The whole media narrative right now is changing about COVID numbers, about masks, about vaccines and efficacy. The whole thing they're changing the narrative on, which we'll maybe dig into on Thursday a little bit as to why. I have a few ideas as to why. But Sonya Sotomayor just out and out lied to the American people. There are not 100,000 children in the hospital. There are not anywhere near that. There's 3,500 at most, and maybe from COVID and definitely with COVID. They might be in there for other reasons, a broken arm, and they happen to test positive for COVID, and so now they're listed as being there with COVID, or from COVID, sorry. Now, I've heard a lot of people say, well, man, Sonya Sotomayor, she misspoke. Or, Sotomayor, she's dumb. She is not dumb, and she did not misspeak. She is not stupid, and she is not uninformed. I've heard way too much in the course of the last couple years of people underestimating the evil that communists portray, embrace. Just like Joe Biden pulling out of Afghanistan. He wasn't doing that because he cared about anything other than his own interests and, in fact, China. He pulled out, and I have no direct evidence of this, but Bagram Air Base was the only air base we had in the Middle East. And it could launch bombing runs throughout all of the Middle East and the Far East, including China. Joe Biden, through his children, has been, and there is a lot of evidence of this, he has been made handsomely rich because of contract after contract with the Chinese leadership. He is in their pocket. See, the communist doesn't care about the truth. He only cares about their own good, their own welfare, their own mission of bringing about greater communism. So Sonya Sotomayor isn't stupid or uninformed. She is, after all, a justice on the Supreme Court of the United States, one of only 9 people who hold that position at any given time. She graduated with her law degree. She, I'm sure, clerked. I didn't do a whole run-up of her history because, frankly, I don't care enough. But she's not stupid. She's no dummy. She made it to the top of the legal system. Don't underestimate these people. They know what they're doing. It's like when Obama was in office. Everybody was, oh, he's an idiot. Oh, he doesn't know what he's doing. Oh, he's a terrible president. Well, he was a terrible president. But he knew exactly what he was doing. He was not an idiot. He just didn't share the same worldview as you. So it appeared like he was an idiot. Just like now, Joe Biden, even though he is a rambling dolt, he knows what he's doing. He might be senile, but he put the people around him that he put around him. He knows what he's doing. at least when he's awake and not sipping out of his sippy cup. This lie that Sonya Sotomayor told, perpetrated upon the American people. People with agendas, they don't want the light of truth to shine on whatever evidence might be out there. They do not want the truth to come out. Just like the story last week of the D.C. jail. I had mentioned on January 6th that there's about 40 people in the D.C. jail who were at the January 6th, I don't know what to call it. It's not an insurrection. It wasn't even really right. It was a setup. There's a lot of evidence out there. On my Patreon, you can go. There's a link to a ton of stories that go through all of last year documenting all the odd things surrounding January 6th. I really encourage you to go check that out, patreon.com/reclaimcatholic. There's a link on there. I don't have time to go through it all right now. But the communists don't want the truth to come out. Well, Jacob Lang, who was arrested for his role in the January 6th, let's just call it a riot for right now, he was arrested 10 days after the 6th, and he has been in jail ever since. He spent 200 days in solitary confinement, which means 23 hours a day alone in a cell. So think about that. 23 hours a day alone for 200 days. And for what reason? He claims he had a shield to protect himself from the D.C. police, and he was trying to help save people. One person, let me find his name quick, Philip Anderson, even filed an affidavit with the court saying that Jacob Lang saved his life. Jake proceeded to save my life by pulling me out of the pile of people. If Jake was not present to help me, I would have died on January 6th, and it would have been because of the actions that the D.C. police took. Anderson, this article says Anderson, who is black, wrote. Jacob Lang goes on to say that the prosecutors tried to offer him a plea deal called a debriefment, which is like a gag order. It's not a plea deal. It's the minimum sentencing guidelines, which is 10 years. And this would mean that they could ask him anything they wanted about the 6th, but he would not be allowed to talk about it afterwards. Otherwise, the deal is off the table. It's broken, and he goes to prison for a very long time. That's not a plea deal. That's manipulation. They go on to say in the story the conditions that they're in. He's in a pod with 40 other men who were all at January 6th. And the interesting too is Jacob Lang had the shield, and there are people next to him beating police officers or throwing things at them, literally fighting with the police, and they were not arrested, but he was. He says that they sing the national anthem every day. They do Bible studies in the morning and at night. Some guys want to give in and do a plea deal, but they support one another. And one of the other things, and this is going to lead to something I think is going to happen in the future, they have been denied all barbering services. So they have not had haircuts. They have not had beards trimmed for over a year now, which makes me think that they will be paraded out in some news story in the coming months, maybe a year from now at the next anniversary. You know what? No, it won't be a year from now. It'll be probably the October surprise for the midterms. The Democrats will get pictures of these guys probably around September or October, and they will parade it out in the media to say, look, these guys are the ones who stormed the Capitol. Remember that? Storming the Capitol. And they wanted to overthrow the government. And look, they all look like terrorists. You wait. In October, you will start to see pictures of these guys again. and the reason why they've been in jail for so long in solitary confinement. Just look at how they look. They are terrorists. You watch. Mark my words. We'll come back to this then. I have a cool thing I wanted to offer, but maybe we'll wait on Thursday. Great top 10 discoveries of 2021 biblical archaeology. We'll maybe talk about that on Thursday. But one other thing I just wanted to make mention of, and how people with agendas don't want the truth to be out there. Because when people can find the truth and think for themselves and reason through everything, they'll come to their own conclusions, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But one thing I want to know, and I'm sure we'll never, or maybe not never, but at least anytime soon, get this information. A few years ago, there was a survey that went out from Rome to every bishop of the world, asking about their experience with the 1962 missal in their diocese. How many people are going to it, how many priests say it, how many masses are being said a week or a month, whatever. Just Rome wanted a landscape of the 1962 missal. Where are the results? I mean, I understand it's the church and it's for the bishops, and we lay people aren't privy to that information necessarily. But I'm curious what it said. With all the things that are going on right now around the traditional Latin Mass from Rome and in dioceses, and some bishops have been very courageous, have allowed priests to just kind of carry on with what they're doing, and others have been locking down incredibly harshly. I'm just curious what that survey said. I have an inkling of what it said based on my own experience and the people I talk to and what I see in my own archdiocese surrounding attendance at Latin Masses. But boy, that survey disappeared pretty quick, didn't it? Well, maybe we'll know one day. Anyway, it is time for Triumphant Church Tuesday, and I have an awesome story today. I kind of pieced it together because as I was studying this man's story, nobody seemed to have a real thorough history of him, so I kind of pieced it together, and he wrote some books too. It'd be worth finding and reading. I don't know if many of them are in print anymore. But the man's name is Takashi Nagai, and so let's dig into this. Takashi Nagai was born in 1908 in the rural Shimaine province to a Shinto family. His father was a Western-educated doctor. When Takashi himself entered Nagasaki's medical college in 1928, he considered himself an atheist and scientific materialist. Though he had high aspirations, something seemed to be missing. He tried to numb his dissatisfaction with intensive study and occasional drinking and carousing. But at his mother's deathbed, he was struck with the sense that she had not simply been annihilated. Her spirit somehow lived on. And on hospital rounds, he saw that medical techniques were not in themselves enough to care for the whole suffering human person. Nagasaki presented him with a unique opportunity. It contained the only significant Catholic population in all of Japan. Here, martyrs had shed their blood and ordinary Christians had handed down the faith secretly for 3 centuries without priests. When Japan opened to the West, Nagasaki's Christianity flourished anew. Takashi took lodgings with the Catholic Moriyama family, where he had a decisive encounter. Their adult daughter, Midori, befriended him, and in her he saw a conviction and a purity of soul, unlike anything he had ever known. When Japan invaded Manchuria, Takashi was drafted, and Midori promised to pray for him every day. In Manchuria, he endured the horrors of scientific warfare for the first time, treating wounded from both sides under appalling conditions. Meanwhile, Midori prayed for his safety and for his conversion. She wrote to him and sent him a catechism, which he read. He began to realize that this devoted, beautiful woman and her faith held the answer to the meaning of life, and the brutal military grind of the invasion, with its battles, prostitutes, and drunkenness, only served to make it clearer. He survived the tour of duty and returned safely. Midori's prayers were answered. In June of 1934, he was baptized, and soon after they were married. Takashi's faith grew stronger through the companionship he and Midori shared from 1934 until that awful day of August 9th, 1945, which included learning that he had incurable leukemia near the end of World War II. After the atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, he found, in the wreckage that had once been their home, only her bones, ashes, and an object fused together into a metal lump in the skeletal remains of her hand. At the moment of the fiery atomic explosion on August 9th, 1945, she had been praying the rosary. Upon the sorrowful finding, Takashi prayed, "Dearest God, thank you for allowing her to die praying. Ah, gracious Jesus our Savior, you once sweat blood and bore the heavy cross to your crucifixion, and now you have shed peaceful light on the mystery of suffering and death." On August 15th, 1945, a radio message from the Emperor announced Japan's surrender. At the beginning of September, Nagai was dying. The radiation from the atomic bomb had made his illness of leukemia worse. He received the last sacraments and said, "I will die happy," then fell into a semi-coma. Someone then brought him water from the Grotto of Lourdes that had been built near Nagasaki, not far from his hospital, by Father, now Saint, Maximilian Kolbe. He would later write, "I heard a voice telling me to ask Father Maximilian Kolbe to pray for me. I did this. Then I addressed myself to Christ, saying, 'Lord, I deliver myself into your divine hands.'" The next morning, Takashi was out of danger, and he would attribute to Father Kolbe, now canonized, Saint Maximilian Kolbe, the 6 years of remission from his disease that followed. He dedicated the rest of his own short-suffering life to witnessing what he had learned from her, that the love of God is greater than the violence of this world, and is our hope for peace. Man, Takashi Nagai, lived in Nagasaki. And there's a lot of other details about his life. He organized in the hospital where he was suffering from his leukemia. Doctors and nurses, when the atomic bomb fell, he organized kind of triage teams to go out and take care of these horribly wounded people. They brought the wounded up on top of the hill nearby to take care of them, and he took care of them himself as a doctor for a couple days before he went back to look for his wife. His 2 children and their grandmother were safe out of the city at the time, and Midori remained in the home where she died. But Takashi spent his whole life at the service of his fellow man, pioneering radiology, x-rays, all kinds of things, even at the risk of his own health. He got leukemia because the equipment leaked radiation, but nonetheless, and he knew this, and nonetheless, he studied and he served so that he could help bring health and well-being to as many people as possible. So let us, this day and this week, learn from Takashi Nagai and find ways to offer our life in the service of our fellow man, in the service of Christ, that we might serve him and love him and know him, and so that we might go out into the world and help convert hearts and tend to the needy people, which increase every day because of the hands of communism and socialism. They don't even know it. And so let us go and serve those people with tenderness and compassion and mercy, that they might come to know the love of Christ and help the church recover and reclaim our culture before it is too far gone. Let us pray. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. God bless you. We'll see you on Thursday.
Thank you for listening to a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.